Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos felt the first engine die at 8,000 feet. The C-130's massive frame shuddered as sand-choked turbines ceased, their familiar roar replaced by an ominous silence. Behind her, 70 of America's finest Special Forces soldiers sat strapped in, trusting her to deliver them safely through the worst sandstorm she'd seen in 15 years of military flying. "Ma'am?" Her co-pilot's voice cracked through the intercom. "Engine 2 just flamed out." Maria's hands moved instinctively to the controls as the second engine coughed, sputtered, and died. No power. No airports for 200 miles. Enemy territory below. She keyed her microphone with steady fingers. "Gentlemen, we're going to earn our pay today. Before we dive into this incredible story of courage and skill, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. Let's see how far this story of American heroism reaches around the world. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, just 6 hours earlier at Bagram Air Base. The coffee was terrible, but Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos drank it anyway. She sat in the operations tent, watching dust swirl outside the mesh windows. Afghanistan's morning heat was already building, and it wasn't even 7 o'clock yet. "Santos, you're up," Major Williams called from across the tent. He held a clipboard thick with papers. Maria walked over, her flight boots crunching on the gravel floor. 15 years of flying had taught her to read the tension in a briefing officer's face. Williams looked worried. "What's the job?" she asked. "Supply run to Forward Operating Base Phoenix. They're in a tight spot." Williams spread a map on the metal table. His finger traced a route through mountain passes. "Surrounded for 3 days. Running low on everything that matters." Maria studied the coordinates. Phoenix sat in a valley 200 miles northeast, tucked between ridges that made flying tricky on good days. She'd been there twice before. "What's the cargo?" "Medical supplies, ammunition, water purification tablets. The works." Williams flipped through his papers. "Plus you're bringing out 70 men. Special Forces team that completed their mission." 70? Maria looked up. "That's a full load. These boys earned their ride home." Williams pointed to a weather report. "There's a storm system moving in from the west. Big one. Should hit the area around 1400 hours. Maria read the weather data. Wind speeds, dust concentration, visibility projections. None of it looked good. "Major, this storm's going to be a monster. Maybe we should wait it out." Williams shook his head. "Can't wait. Phoenix won't last another day without those supplies. Orders came down from division. Missions a go." Maria had heard those words before. Orders were orders, even when they didn't make sense. She folded the map and tucked it into her flight suit pocket. "Who's my co-pilot?" "Lieutenant Jackson. Good kid, graduated top of his class." Williams handed her the cargo manifest. "He's already doing pre-flight." Maria knew Jackson by reputation. Smart pilot, flew by the book. That was fine. She preferred co-pilots who followed procedures. "Aircraft status?" "Your bird's in good shape. Maintenance ran full checks yesterday." Williams gathered his papers. "Fuel load's complete. Your wheel's up at 0900. Maria glanced at her watch. 90 minutes to take off. Enough time for a thorough walk-around and crew briefing. She stood up and adjusted her flight cap. "Thanks, Major. We'll get those boys home." Williams nodded, but his expression stayed grim. "Maria, be careful out there. This storm's going to be unlike anything you've seen." Outside the operations tent, the morning sun was already brutal. Maria walked across the flight line toward her aircraft. The C-130 Hercules sat on the tarmac like a gray metal whale, its 4 propellers still. Ground crews swarmed around it, loading cargo through the rear ramp. Lieutenant Jackson stood near the nose gear, checking something on his tablet. He was young, maybe 25, with the careful posture of a new pilot trying to prove himself. When he saw Maria approaching, he straightened up. "Good morning, Colonel. Aircraft's looking good. Fuel's topped off, all systems green." "Walk me through it," Maria said. For the next 30 minutes, they inspected every inch of the aircraft. Maria ran her hands along the wing surfaces, checking for damage. She examined the propeller blades for nicks. She tested control surfaces and verified cargo tie-downs. Jackson kept pace with her, answering questions with precision. He knew his aircraft systems cold. That was good. In bad weather, there was no time for hesitation. The cargo hold was packed tight with supplies. Pallets of medical equipment, cases of ammunition, water containers. Everything strapped down and secured. 70 soldiers would fill the remaining space for the return trip. Maria climbed into the cockpit and settled into the left seat. She adjusted the seat height and checked her instruments. Everything felt familiar, comfortable. This was her office, her domain. Jackson slid into the right seat and began running through his checklist. Outside, ground crews were pulling wheel chocks and disconnecting power cables. Maria looked west toward the mountains. Clear skies for now, but she could see a thin haze on the horizon. The storm was building out there, gathering strength. She keyed her radio. Bagram Tower, Hercules 27 requesting taxi clearance. Hercules 27, cleared to taxi runway 27. Wind calm, visibility unlimited. Maria pushed the throttles forward slightly. The big aircraft began rolling across the concrete, its 4 engines humming with power. Through her side window, she watched ground crews stepping back from the taxiway. "Towers got it wrong about that wind," Jackson said, checking his instruments. "I'm seeing gusts from the west at 15 knots. Storm's reaching out to us already." Maria turned the aircraft toward the active runway. The C-130 handled like a truck, but it was her truck. She knew every vibration, every sound it made. At the runway threshold, she set the parking brake and ran through the final checks. Oil pressure good. Hydraulics normal. Flight controls free and correct. Everything looked green on the panel. Bagram Tower, Hercules 27 ready for takeoff. Hercules 27, cleared for takeoff. Contact departure control climbing through 3000. Maria released the brakes and pushed the throttles to takeoff power. 4 turboprop engines roared to life, their combined thrust pushing the heavy aircraft down the runway. The nose lifted at 90 knots, and they climbed into the clear morning sky. "Positive rate, gear up," Maria called. Jackson raised the landing gear handle. "Gear up and locked." Below them, Afghanistan spread out in shades of brown and tan. Mountains jutted up like broken teeth, their peaks lost in morning haze. Maria banked northeast toward Forward Operating Base Phoenix, following the route she'd memorized from the map. Departure, Hercules 27 climbing through 5000 for flight level 250. Hercules 27, radar contact. Climb and maintain flight level 250. Be advised, weather radar showing significant activity your direction of flight. Jackson looked at Maria. "Want me to pull up the weather display?" "Do it." The radar screen filled with green and yellow blotches. To the west, an angry red mass stretched across half the display. The storm was massive, covering hundreds of square miles. Jackson whispered, "Look at the size of that thing." Maria had seen plenty of weather in 15 years, but this system looked different. More organized. More dangerous. The red cores indicated severe turbulence and heavy dust concentration. At 25,000 feet, they leveled off and settled into cruise flight. The air was smooth for now, but Maria could see the first wisps of high cloud streaming in from the west. The storm's advance guard. "How long to Phoenix?" Jackson asked. 90 minutes if the weather holds." Maria adjusted their heading slightly to avoid a mountain peak. "Longer if it doesn't." They flew in comfortable silence for a while. Jackson monitored the radios while Maria watched the terrain below. Afghanistan looked peaceful from 5 miles up, but she knew better. Down there, men were fighting and dying in valleys and villages whose names she'd never learn. 30 minutes into the flight, the first radio call came. Any aircraft monitoring guard frequency, this is Phoenix Base. We have urgent weather update. Maria picked up her microphone. Phoenix Base, Hercules 27 inbound with your supplies. Go ahead with weather. Hercules 27, the storm's moving faster than predicted. We're already seeing dust and wind picking up. Visibility's dropping fast. Jackson checked their navigation display. We're still 60 miles out. Maria keyed the radio again. Phoenix, what's your current weather? Winds gusting to 40 knots, visibility down to 2 miles and falling. Dust starting to blow. That wasn't good. Landing at Phoenix required clear conditions. The runway was short and surrounded by high ground. No margin for error. Phoenix, can you give us a ground speed readout when we get closer? We may need precision approach guidance. Copy that, Hercules. We'll have our best controller on frequency. Jackson was studying the weather radar again. The storm had grown larger, angrier. Red cells now covered their entire route home. Maria, if this keeps moving east, we're going to be stuck at Phoenix until it passes. Maybe. Let's see what it looks like when we get there. But Maria was already thinking ahead. Phoenix had limited fuel and no maintenance facilities. If they couldn't get out before the storm hit, they'd be sitting ducks until it passed. That could be days. Hercules 27, Phoenix Base. Go ahead, Phoenix. We've got 70 souls ready for extraction. These boys have been through hell. They need to get home. Maria looked at Jackson. She could see the question in his eyes. Push through questionable weather, or play it safe and leave good men stranded. Phoenix, we're coming. Have them ready to load fast. Copy that. And Hercules? Thanks for not turning around. 20 minutes later, the western horizon turned black. The storm wall stretched from ground to sky, a moving mountain of dust and wind. Lightning flickered inside it like camera flashes. Jackson pointed at the radar display. It's accelerating. Moving at 60 knots now. Maria did the math in her head. They'd reach Phoenix with maybe 30 minutes to spare before the storm hit. Enough time to land, load the soldiers, and get airborne again. If everything went perfectly. Phoenix Base, Hercules 27, 40 miles out. Request current conditions. Visibility down to 1 mile and decreasing. Winds gusting to 50. You'd better hurry. Through the windscreen, Maria could see dust beginning to swirl in the distance. The wall of sand was racing toward them like a brown tsunami. She pushed the throttles forward, coaxing every knot of speed from the old aircraft. The race was on. Phoenix Base appeared through the dust like a mirage. The small runway cut across a narrow valley, surrounded by steep hills on 3 sides. Maria could see vehicles moving below, kicking up their own clouds of dust as they rushed to prepare for her arrival. Phoenix Base, Hercules 27 on final approach. Runway in sight. Hercules 27, winds now 60 at 50 gusting 70. You're cleared to land, but you'd better make it quick. The storm's right behind you. Maria looked over her shoulder. The wall of sand towered above them, maybe 5 miles back and closing fast. Inside that brown mass, she could see flashes of lightning. This wasn't just a sandstorm. It was a full-blown desert tempest. She lined up with the runway and dropped the landing gear. The aircraft shook as crosswinds tried to push them sideways. Maria used every bit of her experience to keep the big plane centered on the narrow strip of concrete. The wheels touched down hard. Maria reversed the propellers and stood on the brakes. Dust swirled around the aircraft as they rolled out, then turned toward the loading area. Nice landing, Jackson said, but his voice was tight with concern. Through the windscreen, they could see soldiers already running toward the aircraft. 70 men with full packs and weapons, moving with the urge and efficiency of troops who knew they needed to get out fast. Phoenix ground, Hercules 27 requesting immediate refuel and passenger loading. Negative on the refuel, Hercules. Fuel trucks already taking shelter. Load your passengers and get out of here. You've got maybe 20 minutes before this thing hits. Maria shut down the engines to save fuel while the soldiers boarded. She could hear boots pounding up the cargo ramp, voices calling out orders. These weren't fresh recruits. These were hardened Special Forces operators who'd been fighting for days. They moved like they meant business. Sergeant Williams, the ground commander, appeared in the cockpit doorway. His uniform was stained with sweat and dust, his face lined with fatigue. "Colonel, my boys are loaded and secured. 70 souls, all accounted for." "How long were you surrounded?" Maria asked. 4 days. Ran out of water yesterday." Williams glanced back toward his men. They held their position until the mission was complete. Every one of them earned his ride home. Through the side window, Maria watched the storm approaching. It was close enough now that she could see individual dust devils spinning along its leading edge. The air outside was turning brown. "Sergeant, get your men strapped in tight. This is going to be a rough ride." "Yes, ma'am. They've been through worse." Williams disappeared back into the cargo hold. Maria could hear him talking to his soldiers, his voice calm and steady. Good NCOs were worth their weight in gold. Jackson was running through the engine start checklist. "Number 1 engine ready for start." "Start 1. The first engine coughed to life, its propellers spinning slowly at first, then faster. Maria watched the gauges come alive. Oil pressure good. Temperatures rising normally. "Number 2 engine ready. Start 2. As the second engine spun up, the first gust of storm wind hit them. The aircraft rocked on its landing gear, and dust began swirling around the cockpit windows. "Phoenix Tower, Hercules 27 ready for immediate departure." Hercules 27, winds now variable at 70 gusting 90. Visibility dropping fast. "You're cleared for takeoff any runway." Maria started engines 3 and 4 quickly. The storm was maybe 2 miles away now, a moving wall of destruction racing across the desert floor. She could see rocks and debris tumbling along ahead of it. All engines running. "Let's go." She released the brakes and pushed the throttles forward. The C-130 began moving toward the runway, fighting against crosswinds that tried to push them sideways. Dust swirled so thick now that Maria could barely see the runway centerline. At the runway threshold, she didn't stop for run-up checks. There was no time. The storm wall was less than a mile away. "Hold on back there," she announced over the intercom. "Gentlemen, we're going to earn our pay today." She pushed the throttles to takeoff power and released the brakes. The aircraft accelerated down the runway, shaking and bouncing as wind gusts hit them from different directions. At 80 knots, dust began pouring through the cabin air vents. The storm had reached the airfield. "Rotate speed," Jackson called out. Maria pulled back on the controls. The nose lifted, but the aircraft felt heavy, sluggish. 70 soldiers plus full fuel load made for a maximum weight takeoff. They climbed into brown air so thick it was like flying through chocolate milk. Maria switched to instruments immediately. Outside visibility was 0. The aircraft bucked and pitched as they hit the storm's turbulence. "Positive rate, gear up." Jackson raised the landing gear. Climbing through 500 feet. That's when Maria heard the sound that made her blood run cold. A grinding, scraping noise from the number 1 engine. Then a loud bang. The engine fire warning light came on. "Engine fire, number 1, Jackson called out, his training taking over. "Engine fire checklist." But before Maria could respond, sand-choked air hit the intake of engine number 2. The RPM gauge dropped like a stone, and the engine seized with a metallic shriek. "Number 2's gone too," Jackson's voice was higher now, stress breaking through his professional calm. Maria looked at her instruments. 2 engines dead. Airspeed bleeding off. Altitude barely 3,000 feet. Below them, nothing but hostile territory and Rocky Mountains. The intercom crackled to life. One of the soldiers in back, his voice steady despite the situation, "Colonel, whatever's happening up there, we trust you to get us home." Maria keyed her microphone with steady fingers. Her voice was calm, controlled. "Gentlemen, we have a situation." The C-130 was falling out of the sky. Maria felt it in her bones before she saw it on the instruments. The nose was dropping, airspeed bleeding away. With only 2 engines running on the right side, the aircraft wanted to roll left and spin into the ground. "Full right rudder," she called to Jackson. "Help me hold this thing level." Jackson's foot pressed hard on the rudder pedal, his knuckles white on the control yoke. "How long can we fly like this?" "We're not flying. We're gliding with style." Maria trimmed the aircraft to reduce control pressure. Every movement had to be precise now. Too much input in any direction would send them into an unrecoverable spin. She looked at the altimeter. 2,800 feet and dropping. At their current rate of descent, they had maybe 10 minutes before they hit the ground. Maybe less in these mountains. The radio crackled. "Hercules 27, Phoenix Base. What's your status?" "Phoenix, we've lost 2 engines. Declaring an emergency. We're going down." Silence on the radio. Then, "Copy your emergency. Search and rescue is not available in current conditions. You're on your own." Jackson stared at her. "Search and rescue? Won't matter anyway." Maria adjusted the throttles on the 2 remaining engines, trying to milk every bit of performance from them. "We land this thing ourselves, or we don't land at all." Behind them, she could hear Sergeant Williams talking to his men. His voice was calm, steady, exactly what soldiers needed to hear when everything was going wrong. "Listen up, people. We've got the best pilot in the Air Force up front. She's going to get us down safe. When she does, I want everybody ready to move. Check your gear, help your buddy, stay calm." Maria had never met Williams before today, but she knew his type. Career NCO. Backbone of the military. The kind of man who could keep 70 scared soldiers focused when death was staring them in the face. "Jackson, give me options. Where can we put this thing down?" Jackson was already studying the terrain display. "There's a road about 15 miles northeast. Straight stretch, maybe 2 miles long. Surface? Hard-packed dirt. Used by supply convoys." Maria looked at their glide path. They were losing 1,000 feet every 3 minutes. 15 miles was too far. They'd hit the ground 5 miles short. What else? "There's a dry lake bed 12 miles north. But it's in the middle of nowhere. No roads in or out. We'll worry about rescue later. Can we reach it?" Jackson ran calculations on his tablet. "Maybe. If we can stretch the glide." Maria had been thinking the same thing. In 15 years of flying, she'd never attempted a dead-stick landing in a C-130. But she remembered her first flight instructor, Captain Morrison. 25 years ago at Pensacola, he'd drilled emergency procedures into every student pilot. "Santos," he'd said, "a good pilot uses her superior judgment to avoid situations requiring superior skill. But when you're already in trouble, superior skill is all you've got left. Time for superior skill." She lowered the nose slightly, trading altitude for airspeed. The aircraft felt different now, heavier. Like flying a brick with wings. But every airplane would glide if you knew how to make it. "Jackson, I need you to calculate our best glide speed. Account for current weight and configuration." "Already on it." His fingers flew over the tablet. 120 knots gives us maximum glide distance. Maria adjusted the throttles and elevator trim. The airspeed needle settled on 120 knots. The rate of descent slowed slightly, but they were still falling fast. Through the storm-darkened windscreen, she caught glimpses of the ground below. Rocky hills, Deep valleys, scattered boulders. Landing gear would be useless in terrain like that. This would be a belly landing, if they were lucky enough to find flat ground. Hercules 27, any aircraft monitoring emergency frequency. Jackson grabbed the radio. Go ahead. This is Warlord 23, Apache gunship. We're 20 miles south of your position. What's your situation? An Apache helicopter. Maria felt a small surge of hope. At least someone knew where they were going down. Warlord, we're a C-130 with 71 souls on board. Lost 2 engines in the sandstorm. Attempting emergency landing at coordinates. Jackson read off their target location. Copy that, Hercules. We'll try to reach your position, but this storm's pretty thick down here. Good luck. The radio went quiet again. Maria focused on keeping the aircraft stable. Every gust of wind tried to roll them over. Every downdraft pushed them toward the ground faster. In the cargo hold, she could hear individual voices now. A young soldier talking about his girlfriend back home. An older sergeant sharing a photo of his kids. Someone quietly singing a hymn. These weren't just passengers. They were sons, fathers, brothers. Men who'd served their country and earned the right to go home. Maria had never lost a passenger in 15 years of flying. She wasn't about to start now. There. Jackson pointed through a gap in the dust clouds. I can see the lake bed. Maria looked where he was pointing. A flat expanse of cracked earth stretched between low hills. It looked about the right size for a C-130, if they could reach it. The altimeter showed 1,500 feet. The lake bed was maybe 8 miles ahead. It would be close. Jackson, I need you to run the emergency landing checklist. Everything except gear and flaps. Roger. Jackson pulled out the emergency procedures handbook. Emergency landing checklist. Fuel pumps off. Off. Electrical non-essential off. Off. They ran through the entire list, securing systems, and preparing for impact. Maria had practiced emergency landings dozens of times in simulators, but never with real lives on the line. The lake bed grew larger in the windscreen. She could see its surface now, cracked and uneven but mostly flat. There were rocks scattered around the edges, but the center looked clear. 1,000 feet. 6 miles to go. We're going to make it, Jackson said. Maria didn't answer. She was watching the winds, feeling how the aircraft responded to her inputs. The storm was trying to push them off course, but she made constant corrections, keeping them lined up with the smoothest part of the lake bed. 800 feet. 4 miles. Sergeant Williams, she called on the intercom. 60 seconds to touchdown. Make sure everyone's secured. Roger, Colonel. All secure back here. 500 feet. 2 miles. The lake bed filled their windscreen now. Maria could see every crack, every rock, every imperfection in their improvised runway. Here we go. Maria held the aircraft steady as the lake bed rushed up toward them. 300 feet. The cracked earth looked like a moonscape, full of holes and scattered rocks. Not exactly what they taught in flight school. 200 feet, Jackson called out. His voice was tight but controlled. Maria could see their touchdown point now. A stretch of flat ground about halfway across the lake bed, the smoothest section she could find. Everything depended on hitting that spot exactly right. 100 feet. Airspeed 120. The aircraft was flying on borrowed time. With only 2 engines providing minimal thrust, they were basically a 70-ton glider. Maria had one chance to get this right. 50 feet. Looking good. The ground filled their windscreen. Maria could see individual rocks, cracks in the dried mud, patches of scrub grass. She pulled the throttles to idle and started the flare, raising the nose to slow their descent. The aircraft settled toward the earth like a tired bird. Maria held the nose up, bleeding off airspeed, waiting for the moment when the wheels would touch down. But they weren't putting the landing gear down. Not on this surface. This would be a belly landing, sliding across the desert floor on the aircraft's reinforced underside. Touchdown, Jackson announced unnecessarily. The C-130 hit the lake bed with a tremendous crash. Metal screamed against rock and dirt as the aircraft slid across the uneven surface. Maria fought to keep the nose straight, using rudder and what little aileron authority she had left. They bounced once, hard enough to throw everyone against their restraints. Then they hit again and stayed down, sliding forward in a cloud of dust and debris. The noise was incredible. Metal grinding, rocks hammering against the fuselage, the remaining engines whining as propellers struck the ground. Maria cut the fuel and electrical systems as they slid. Fire was the biggest danger now. 71 people trapped in a burning aircraft was her worst nightmare. The aircraft lurched to the left as the right wing hit a boulder. For a moment, Maria thought they might cartwheel, but the big plane held together and kept sliding straight. Gradually, friction and rough ground began to slow them down. The grinding noise decreased. The dust clouds started to settle. Finally, after what felt like forever but was probably less than 30 seconds, they stopped. Silence filled the cockpit. Maria could hear her own heartbeat, the tick of cooling metal, wind whistling through cracks in the fuselage. But no screaming. No sounds of panic from the cargo hold. "Jackson, you okay?" "Yeah." He was staring at his instruments in disbelief. "All electrical systems are dead, but we're down." Maria unstrapped from her seat and stood up on shaky legs. Through the side window, she could see they'd slid almost a mile across the lake bed. Behind them was a long scar in the earth where the aircraft had scraped along. "Sergeant Williams," she called toward the cargo hold. "Here, Colonel." His voice was calm, professional. "Running a head count now." Maria walked back into the cargo hold. What she saw amazed her. 70 soldiers sitting in their seats, dusty and shaken but very much alive. A few had bumps and bruises, but no one appeared seriously hurt. Williams was moving from soldier to soldier, checking each man personally. "Johnson, you good? Martinez? Henderson?" Each man nodded or gave a thumbs up. One young private looked up at Maria with wide eyes. "Ma'am, did we just crash land in the middle of nowhere?" "We made an emergency landing," she corrected. "There's a difference." Williams finished his count and walked over to Maria. 70 souls, all present and accounted for. A few bumps and scrapes, but nothing serious. "Good work, Sergeant. Get them organized. We need to secure a perimeter and set up communications." Williams nodded and turned back to his men. "All right, people, listen up. We're down safe, but we're not home yet. Squad leaders, organize your teams. I want security posted and a communications station set up. Move with purpose." The soldiers began unstrapping and gathering their gear. Despite everything they'd been through, they moved with military precision. These were professionals who knew their jobs. Jackson appeared beside Maria. "I got the emergency beacon activated before we lost power. Search and rescue will know where we are." "How long until pickup?" "In this storm?" Jackson looked toward the aircraft's windows, where dust still swirled in the wind. "Could be hours. Maybe longer." Maria nodded. She'd expected that. The storm was still raging outside, making helicopter rescue impossible. They'd have to wait it out. She walked to one of the side windows and looked outside. The landscape was desolate. Rocky hills stretched in all directions, broken only by dry washes and scattered boulders. No roads, no buildings, no signs of civilization. But they were alive. All 71 of them. "Colonel." One of the younger soldiers approached her. "I just wanted to say thank you. That was some flying." "Just doing my job, son." "No ma'am. That was more than a job. You saved our lives." Maria looked around the cargo hold at the faces of the soldiers. Some were young, barely out of their teens. Others were seasoned veterans with gray in their beards. All of them were looking at her with something she'd never seen before. Respect. Gratitude. The kind of look soldiers gave to someone who'd earned their trust. Williams walked over carrying a radio handset. "Colonel, I've got comms established. Warlord 2-3 is trying to reach our position, but the storm's too thick for helicopter ops." Maria took the handset. "Warlord 2-3, this is Hercules 2-7 on the ground. All 71 souls safe and secure. Outstanding news, Hercules. Weather's supposed to clear by dawn. We'll have you out of there first light." Maria looked toward the windows again. Outside, the storm was beginning to show signs of weakening. The dust clouds weren't quite as thick, and she could see patches of clearer air. Dawn was still hours away, but they could wait. They'd made it this far. The first rescue helicopter appeared just after sunrise, a black dot against the clear morning sky. The storm had blown itself out during the night, leaving behind a landscape washed clean by wind and sand. Maria stood outside the wrecked C-130, watching the helicopter approach. Around her, 70 soldiers gathered their gear and prepared for extraction. They'd spent the night sharing stories, rations, and quiet laughter. Men who'd faced death together and lived to tell about it. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust. As the rotors wound down, a flight medic jumped out and ran toward them. "Anyone need medical attention?" Sergeant Williams shook his head. "We're all good. Thanks to her." He nodded toward Maria. The medic looked at the crashed aircraft, then at Maria. "You're the pilot who put this thing down." "That's right." "Hell of a job, Colonel." "Hell of a job." Loading the helicopter took 20 minutes. The soldiers moved efficiently, helping each other climb aboard. As the last man got settled, Williams walked over to Maria. "Ma'am, I've been flying with military pilots for 18 years. Transport, combat, medevac. All kinds." He extended his hand. "But I've never flown with anyone who could land a bird with no engines and bring everybody home alive." Maria shook his hand. "Just did what needed doing, Sergeant." "No ma'am. You did what heroes do." 2 weeks later, Maria stood in the Pentagon briefing room as a 3-star general pinned a distinguished flying cross to her uniform. Her daughter watched from the front row, beaming with pride. After the ceremony, they walked outside into the Virginia sunshine. Her daughter took her hand. "Mom, what was it like? Flying with no engines?" Maria thought about that night in the desert. The sound of metal grinding against rock. 70 soldiers trusting her to get them home. The moment when she realized they were all going to live. "Scary," she said finally. "But worth it." Her daughter squeezed her hand. "Are you a hero now?" Maria looked up at the sky, watching a C-130 climb toward the horizon. Somewhere up there, another crew was carrying soldiers home to their families. "No, sweetheart. I'm just a pilot who had a very interesting day at work." But as they walked toward the car, Maria allowed herself a small smile. Stories like Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos remind us why we honor our military heroes. Their courage, skill, and dedication keep our freedom secure, even when facing impossible odds. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of American heroism. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Do you know someone in the military who's shown this kind of courage? Share their story with us. Until next time, remember that heroes walk among us every day. Sometimes they're wearing uniforms, and sometimes they're just doing their jobs with extraordinary skill and heart.